My ex-wife took everything from me. And I mean everything. The $22 million Texas ranch that my grandfather built with his own 2 hands, the trucking company I'd grown from 3 trucks to a fleet of 47, the land, the livestock, the bank accounts. She even took my dog, a golden retriever named Scout, who'd been my best friend for 8 years. Her final text message still burns in my memory. You'll never recover from this. You're nothing without me. At 33 years old, I found myself sleeping on my buddy's couch and driving Uber 16 hours a day just to afford gas and cheap takeout. One Tuesday night, around 11:40 p.m., I picked up a quiet passenger in a business suit. She was polite, tired, didn't say much. When she got out downtown, I noticed she'd left her purse in the back seat. I could have kept the cash inside. God knows I needed it, but something in me couldn't do it. So I drove across town to the address on her business card and walked into this massive office tower. The kind of place I used to walk into as an equal back when I had everything. The receptionist looked at me like I was lost. "Delivery?" she asked. "Just returning something," I said. She buzzed me up to the 15th floor. The moment I stepped off that elevator, an executive assistant froze mid-step and stared at me like she'd seen a ghost. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Sir, are you James Holloway's son?" I frowned. "I don't know anyone by that name." Her hand went to her mouth. "You don't know? James Holloway worked here in 1987. He was your father." My heart stopped. "My father died when I was a kid," I managed to say. She nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "Yes, 3 months ago. He owned 75% of this company." What she said next changed absolutely everything. Before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe. And hit hype to boost this episode. Drop a comment below with your city or country. I'm always curious where viewers are joining from. Let me take you back to where this nightmare began, because understanding where I fell from makes the climb back up mean something. 2 years earlier, I had it all figured out. Or so I thought. My name is Ethan Holloway. I'm 33 now, but at 31, I was living what most people would call the American dream. Hell, I was living what I called the American dream. I owned a $22 million ranch just outside Austin, Texas. 6,000 acres of prime land with white fences that gleamed in the sun, a main house that looked like something out of Southern Living magazine, stables for 12 horses, a guest house that could sleep 10 people, and a view that stretched so far you could see 3 counties on a clear day. On summer evenings, I'd sit on the back porch with a bourbon and watch the sunset paint the hills in shades of orange and purple, and I'd think, I made it. I actually made it. My trucking company, Holloway Freight Solutions, employed 63 people across Texas and New Mexico. We specialized in temperature-controlled transport across the Southwest, mostly pharmaceuticals and perishable goods. The margins were good, the reputation was solid, and we were growing steadily at about 15 to 20% year over year. I had my name on the side of 47 trucks. Every time I saw one on the highway, I felt this surge of pride. I had investments, savings, retirement accounts that were on track. I had respect in my community. I served on the board of 2 local charities. People called me Mr. Holloway at the bank. The mayor knew my name, and I had Miranda Prescott. Well, Miranda Holloway for 5 years. We met at a charity gala in Dallas when I was 26 and she was 24. I remember that night so clearly it hurts. She was wearing this emerald green dress that matched her eyes, her dark hair swept up in some complicated style that probably cost more than my truck payment. She was stunning, sophisticated, magnetic. The daughter of a prominent attorney named Richard Prescott, she moved through that crowd like she owned it. When I approached her at the bar, she turned to me and smiled, and I swear to God, the whole room disappeared. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else," she said. "That obvious?" I laughed. "Only to someone who feels the same way," she said. "These things are always so performative, don't you think?" She had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room who mattered, like she was sharing secrets with you that no one else got to hear. Looking back now, I realize that was the first red flag. She didn't make everyone feel special. She made people she could use feel special. To everyone else, she was polite but cold, transactional. But I was young and stupid and in love, or what I thought was love. We dated for 8 months. She'd drive down from Dallas on weekends, and we'd explore Austin together, go to concerts, have dinner at fancy restaurants I'd never heard of. She introduced me to her world, country clubs, galas, art gallery openings. I introduced her to mine, barbecue joints, honky-tonks, sunrise rides on the ranch. I proposed on the ranch, on a hilltop overlooking the property, at sunset. I'd set up a table with champagne and flowers. I had a whole speech prepared. I got 3 words into it before she said yes. We got married at her family's estate in Highland Park, one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in Dallas. It was a massive wedding, 300 guests, half of whom I didn't know. There was an orchestra, not a DJ, champagne that cost more per bottle than most people make in a week, 5-course dinner, fireworks. Her father gave a toast that I should have listened to more carefully. To my daughter Miranda, Richard Prescott said, raising his glass, who has always known exactly what she wanted and exactly how to get it, and to Ethan, who I'm sure will provide the life she deserves. Not the life we'd build together, the life she deserves. Everyone laughed and clinked glasses. I should have heard the warning in those words. The first 3 years were good. Great, even. Miranda loved the ranch, loved hosting parties where Dallas socialites would drive down for the weekend. She'd spend weeks planning these events. Which caterer, which flowers, which wine pairing. She loved being Mrs. Holloway, loved introducing me as my husband, who owns Holloway Freight Solutions. She was invested in the image of our success, I realize now, not the success itself. I was working 70-hour weeks building the company, but I didn't mind. Every new contract, every new truck added to the fleet, every employee hired. It all felt like building something that mattered. Miranda would sometimes visit the office, usually when we had important clients visiting. She'd wear her designer dresses and smile and play the perfect supportive wife. "You two are relationship goals," one of our clients' wives told her once. Miranda squeezed my hand and said, "I married my best friend. I'm the lucky one." I believed her. But then the economy started shifting. It was subtle at first, the kind of thing you notice in spreadsheets before you notice in daily life. Fuel costs rising week after week, insurance premiums jumping, a few clients going under and not paying their final invoices, leaving us holding 5-figure losses. Competition from larger logistics companies that could undercut our prices because of their volume. Supply chain disruptions that made scheduling routes a nightmare. Nothing catastrophic, nothing unusual for the industry, just the normal challenges of running a business in a difficult economic climate, but it meant I had to tighten the belt a bit. I stopped taking a full owner's draw some months, reinvesting the profits back into the company instead. I cut back on unnecessary expenses, renegotiated vendor contracts, got more involved in the day-to-day operations to reduce management overhead. I started working longer hours, coming home at 8 or 9 instead of 6, taking fewer risks on speculative contracts, saying no to things. Miranda hated it. It started small, comments here and there. "We're not going to Napa for our anniversary?" she asked one evening in April, her voice carrying that sharp edge I'd learned to recognize. "Babe, I need to be here. We're in the middle of negotiations with a major pharmaceutical client. If we land this contract, it's a game changer. There's always something. This is important. And I'm not? That's not fair," I said. "You know how much this business means to us." "To you," she corrected. "It means everything to you." Then came the bigger arguments. "We're not going to the Hamptons this summer?" she asked one night over dinner at the ranch. We were eating takeout Thai food because I'd worked late and neither of us felt like cooking. "We need to be smart right now. The market's uncertain. We've got 3 major contracts up for renewal, and 2 of them are being very aggressive about pricing." "Your grandfather built an empire," she said, her fork clattering against her plate. "He didn't do it by being afraid." "I'm not afraid. I'm being responsible." "You're being small," she snapped. "You're thinking small." I took a breath, trying to stay calm. The summer house in the Hamptons costs us $40,000 a month. We'd be there for 2 weeks. That's money we could use to... To what? Buy another truck? Hire another driver? She laughed bitterly. "Oh, when does it end, Ethan? When do we get to enjoy the success?" "We are enjoying it. Look around. We have all of this." She looked around the dining room like she was seeing it for the first time and finding it wanting. "Your father..." She stopped herself, but I knew what she was going to say. "My father what?" "Nothing." "No, say it. You were going to bring up my father." She stood up from the table. "Your father abandoned you and your mother when you were 3 years old. You built all of this by yourself from nothing. Don't you think you deserve to enjoy it?" It was a reasonable question. It was also manipulation. My father. The man who abandoned my mother and me when I was 3 years old. I had no memories of him. My mother never spoke about him except to say he was gone and we were better off. She raised me alone, working 2 jobs, one as a secretary at a law firm, one at a retail store on weekends. We never had much money, but we had enough. When she died of breast cancer when I was 24, she left me $800,000 from a life insurance policy and the proceeds from selling her house. It was everything she had. Her final gift to me was the seed money that started everything. I'd invested it all into land and business. I'd turned $800,000 into $22 million in 7 years through smart decisions, hard work, and calculated risks. Everything I had, I'd earned. But to Miranda, I was always living in someone else's shadow. My absent father, my dead mother. Someone else's legacy that I was trying to honor or overcome. She was wrong, but I didn't know how to explain that to her. The distance between us grew like a crack in a foundation. You don't notice it at first, and then one day you realize the whole structure is unstable. Miranda started spending more time in Dallas with her friends. Expensive lunches at the country club, spa days that cost more than I'd spent on food in a month, shopping trips where she'd come home with bags from Neiman Marcus and Hermes. Our credit card bills ballooned. $5,000 one month, $8,000 the next, $12,000 in August. When I asked her to cut back, when I suggested we needed to be more mindful of our spending, she looked at me with pure contempt. I married a successful man, Ethan, she said, her voice cold. Not a penny pincher who's afraid to spend money. I'm not afraid to spend money. I'm trying to protect what we have. What we have, she repeated slowly, is becoming less impressive by the day. That's when I knew our marriage was over. I didn't admit it to myself yet, but somewhere deep down, I knew. When your partner stops seeing you as a teammate and starts seeing you as a disappointing investment, there's no coming back from that. The trucking company hit a rough patch that turned into a crisis. It started with a driver named Tommy Henderson. Tommy was 53, been with me since the beginning, reliable as sunrise. He'd driven over 1 million miles without a single accident. Until he fell asleep at the wheel on I-10, just outside of Seguin. It was 3 a.m. on a Tuesday in October. Tommy was hauling $400,000 worth of pharmaceutical cargo, insulin mostly, along with some chemotherapy drugs. Temperature-controlled, time-sensitive, irreplaceable for the patients waiting for it. He drifted across 2 lanes, overcorrected, and jackknifed. The trailer rolled twice. The refrigeration unit was destroyed. Every single vial, every bottle, every box was ruined. Thank God he survived. Broken ribs, concussion, fractured collarbone, but alive. I got the call at 3:47 a.m. from the state police. I remember sitting on the edge of the bed, phone pressed to my ear, listening to them explain what happened and feeling everything I'd built start to crumble. Is Tommy okay? That was my first question. He's stable, en route to University Hospital in San Antonio. And the cargo? Total loss, sir. Miranda stirred next to me. What's wrong? Tommy crashed, I said, my voice hollow. Lost the whole load. She sat up. How much was it worth? 400,000? She was quiet for a moment. Then, that's what insurance is for. She was right. That's what insurance was for. But what she didn't understand, what she never bothered to try to understand, was that in the trucking business, accidents aren't just about money, they're about reputation. The insurance fight was brutal and prolonged. Our carrier argued that Tommy violated hours of service regulations, even though our logs showed he was compliant. They brought in accident reconstruction experts who claimed Tommy had been distracted rather than fatigued. They dragged their feet on every payment, every approval, every step of the process. Meanwhile, our client, a major pharmaceutical distributor, terminated our contract immediately. The contract had a clause about cargo loss, and they exercised it without hesitation. Within 2 weeks, 3 other clients did the same thing. Not because we'd lost their cargo, but because our reputation had taken a hit. In logistics, perception is everything. If you're seen as unreliable, you're finished. I tried to salvage it. I spent 18-hour days on the phone with clients, offering discounts, guarantees, anything to keep their business. I personally visited 12 companies across Texas and New Mexico, sitting in waiting rooms for hours just to get 15 minutes with a procurement director. Some of them were sympathetic but firm. Ethan, we like you. We really do. But we can't take the risk right now. Others were cold. We're going with Southwest Freight. They're offering better rates, and they haven't had any incidents. I had to lay off 12 people, 12 families who depended on me for their livelihoods. I remember calling each one of them personally. I didn't hide behind HR or let my operations manager handle it. These were people I knew, people whose kids I'd met at company picnics, people who'd worked their asses off for me. Maria Gonzalez, a dispatcher who'd been with me for 4 years, cried on the phone. Mr. Holloway, I understand. I know you're doing everything you can. I'm so sorry, Maria. If things turn around, you're the first person I'm calling. I know, she said. Good luck, sir. I mean that. Those conversations destroyed me. Each one felt like a personal failure. Miranda watched it all with cold, calculating eyes. I'd see her on her laptop late at night, spreadsheets open, her face illuminated by the screen. When I'd ask what she was working on, she'd close the laptop quickly. "Just managing some personal accounts," she'd say. "Since when do you manage personal accounts?" "Since you stopped being capable of it." The jabs got sharper. The silences got longer. "We stopped sleeping in the same bed." She moved into the guest room. "Because your stress is keeping me awake." "We stopped eating meals together." "We stopped talking about anything that mattered." I remember the exact moment I realized she was planning something. It was a Thursday evening in early November. I came home exhausted after a 16-hour day in San Antonio, trying to salvage a client relationship that was circling the drain. I'd succeeded, barely. Convinced them to give us one more chance, one more contract, but at rates so low we'd barely break even. But it was something. It was survival. I walked into the house expecting it to be empty. Miranda spent most nights in Dallas now, but she was there, in the living room, papers spread across the coffee table, her laptop open, her phone on speaker with someone I didn't recognize talking about asset division strategies. When she heard me come in, she quickly ended the call and started gathering the papers. "What's going on?" I asked. "Nothing," she said, not meeting my eyes. "Miranda, what are you working on?" "Just some personal things, Ethan. Nothing for you to worry about." But the way she said it, the way she couldn't look at me, the way her hands shook slightly as she stacked the papers, I knew. "You're planning to leave me." She finally looked up. Her face was composed, cold, calculated. "We're not happy, Ethan. You know that as well as I do. So we go to counseling. We work on it. We don't just give up." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Work on it? You mean wait around while you drive your company into the ground? While we lose everything?" "I'm fighting to save what we have." "You're failing," she said simply. "And I'm not going down with you." I felt something break inside me. Not my heart, exactly. Something deeper. The foundation of who I thought I was. "If you want a divorce, just say it." She stood up, gathering her things. "My lawyer will be in touch." And she walked out. 2 weeks later, on a gray Monday morning in November, a process server showed up at my office. Not at home, not in private. At my office, in front of my employees and 2 clients who were sitting in the lobby waiting for a meeting. The guy walked in and said loudly, "Ethan Holloway?" I was walking through the lobby toward the conference room. "Yes? You've been served." He handed me an envelope and walked out. Everyone in the lobby stared at me. My office manager, Jennifer, looked mortified. The 2 clients exchanged glances. I opened the envelope with shaking hands and saw the words, "Petition for divorce," at the top. The humiliation was the point. Miranda wanted everyone to see me brought low. I excused myself, went into my office, and read the entire document. It wasn't just a divorce petition, it was a declaration of war. She was claiming that the ranch was her separate property because of some legal technicality involving how we'd structured the title when we got married. Her lawyer argued that while I'd provided the down payment, she'd contributed substantial improvements and sweat equity that entitled her to full ownership. She was claiming that she'd contributed substantial intellectual and social capital to Holloway Freight Solutions, that her connections, her networking, her strategic guidance entitled her to 50% ownership of the business. She was claiming emotional distress, mental anguish, that I'd been controlling, manipulative, financially abusive. None of it was true, not a single word. But truth didn't matter. Perception did. And her lawyer, a shark named Bradley Kensington, specialized in creating perception. My lawyer was a guy named Thomas Reeves, recommended by a business associate. Tom was good, experienced, fair. But he was honest with me from day one. The battle lasted 11 months. 11 months that aged me a decade. 11 months of depositions where Bradley Kensington tried to paint me as a controlling, abusive husband who'd isolated Miranda and gaslit her about finances. "Isn't it true, Mr. Holloway, that you refused to let your wife have access to bank accounts?" "No, we had joint accounts. She had full access to everything." "But you monitored her spending, didn't you? You questioned her purchases?" I asked her to be mindful of our budget during a difficult economic period. That's not control, that's communication. "Communication," Bradley repeated with a smirk. "Is that what you call it when you text your wife that she's spending too much on clothes?" He held up a printed text message, something I'd sent in frustration after a particularly expensive shopping trip. "Can you read this for the court?" I read it, my face burning. "This is getting out of hand. We need to talk about spending." "Out of hand," Bradley said. "Strong language for a husband addressing his wife, wouldn't you say?" It was $5,000 at Neiman Marcus in one afternoon, I said. We were trying to save the business. Ah, yes, the business. The business you claim my client had no part in building, despite the fact that she hosted clients, networked with potential partners, and provided strategic advice for 5 years. She attended parties. That's not the same as building a business. So you're saying my client's contributions were worthless? I'm saying she wasn't an operational partner in the business. But she was your life partner. Doesn't that count for something? Round and round we went. Miranda's deposition was a masterclass in victim performance. She cried at precisely the right moments. Her voice would shake when talking about the emotional abuse. She'd pause dramatically when asked about the financial control. She claimed I'd prevented her from having a career of her own, that she'd sacrificed her potential to support mine. Never mind that she'd never expressed any interest in working. Never mind that she'd turned down the 2 job offers she'd received during our marriage because they weren't senior enough for someone of her caliber. The judge was a 60-year-old woman named Patricia Simmons who seemed to relate more to Miranda than to me. Every ruling went her way. Every motion I filed was denied. Every motion Bradley filed was granted. My lawyer, Tom Reeves, tried to stay optimistic, but I could see the defeat in his eyes. Ethan, I have to be straight with you, he said one evening after a particularly brutal hearing. Judge Simmons doesn't like you. I don't know if it's personal or if she just believes Miranda's narrative, but we're not going to win this fight. So what do? You settle. You take the best deal you can get, and you move on with your life. She wants everything, Tom. I know, but if we go to trial, you might end up with even less. At least in settlement, we have some negotiating power. He was right, but it didn't make it any easier. The settlement negotiations were brutal. Bradley opened with demands that were so extreme they were almost laughable. The ranch, 100% ownership of the trucking company, $50,000 a month in spousal support for 10 years, and half of my retirement accounts. Tom countered with something reasonable, a 50-50 split of marital assets. No spousal support given that we'd only been married 5 years and Miranda was fully capable of supporting herself, and me retaining the trucking company since it was my business. Bradley laughed. We went back and forth for 3 months. Each round of negotiations chipped away at what I had left. Miranda wanted the ranch. Okay, but she had to buy out my half. No, she didn't have the cash. Then she wanted me to take a note payable over 10 years. At what interest rate? 3%. That's below market. Take it or leave it. Miranda wanted half the trucking company. Tom argued it was my separate property since I'd started it before we married. Bradley produced documents showing I'd restructured the company 2 years into our marriage and retitled it as community property for estate planning purposes, something Miranda's father had advised me to do. A trap I'd walked right into. Round and round. I was drowning in legal fees. Tom was charging $350 an hour, and we were billing 80 hours a month. Bradley was probably charging Miranda's father twice that, but Richard Prescott had deeper pockets than I did. My savings were draining. I'd started pulling money out of the business to pay for the divorce, which meant I couldn't invest in growth, couldn't replace aging equipment, couldn't compete for the contracts that required proof of financial stability. The business started to spiral. More clients left. Revenue dropped 20%, then 30%, then 40%. I was fighting a war on 2 fronts and losing both battles. One by one, people in our social circle took sides, and most of them took Miranda's side. She'd started her smear campaign early, telling everyone who'd listen that I was abusive, controlling, that I'd hidden money from her, that I'd threatened her. None of it was true. But she was the attractive woman with tears in her eyes. I was the angry husband with failing business. Who are you going to believe? Invitations dried up. Business partners became distant. People I'd considered friends stopped returning my calls. I remember running into a guy named David Chen at a gas station. David and I had been in a networking group together for 3 years. We'd met monthly, shared business advice, supported each other. When he saw me, he quickly looked away and pretended to be fascinated by the gas pump. "David," I called out. He couldn't ignore me. He turned, forcing a smile. "Ethan, hey, how are you?" "Good, busy, you know how it is." "Yeah. Listen, I haven't seen you at the networking meetings." "Oh, yeah, I've been meaning to call you about that." He wouldn't meet my eyes. "I've been hearing some things about you and Miranda, and I just think it's better if I keep my distance until things settle down." "Things you heard from Miranda?" "I don't want to get in the middle of it, man." "There is no middle. There's the truth, and there's what she's telling people." He shook his head. "I'm sorry, Ethan. I've got to go." And he left. That happened over and over. People believing Miranda's lies because they were more comfortable than confronting the truth. Miranda, meanwhile, played the victim perfectly. She'd post on social media about surviving narcissistic abuse and finding myself after years of being controlled. She'd share articles about financial abuse and gaslighting. Her friends would comment with supportive messages. "You're so strong. You deserve so much better. I always knew something was off about him." I made the mistake of looking at her social media for the first few months. Each post was a knife to the gut. Tom finally told me to stop. "You're torturing yourself," he said. "Block her. Stop following her. Focus on what you can control." He was right, but knowing someone is systematically destroying your reputation and not being able to do anything about it is a special kind of hell. Finally, in September, nearly 11 months after she'd served me with papers, we reached a settlement, or rather, I capitulated to avoid complete annihilation. The ranch, awarded to Miranda, with me owing her an additional $1.2 million in equalization payments for my half of the equity. The trucking company, forced sale, with 70% of proceeds going to Miranda. The bank accounts, split, but she'd already drained most of them during the separation. The investments, gone. Even Scout, my golden retriever, was awarded to her because she'd registered him under her name years ago as a gift to herself. I remember the day I had to pack up and leave the ranch. Miranda wasn't even there. She'd sent movers to watch me, making sure I didn't take anything that wasn't explicitly listed as mine. I walked through that house one last time. The home I'd built, the life I'd created. Scout was in the backyard. He ran to me when he saw me, tail wagging, completely unaware that this was goodbye. I knelt down and held him. "I'm so sorry, buddy. I'm so sorry." One of the movers cleared his throat. "Sir, we need to finish up." I stood, my vision blurred with tears, and walked away. Scout barked and barked, trying to follow me. I didn't look back. I couldn't. That night, I got the text message from Miranda. "You'll never recover from this. You're nothing without me." She was wrong about the second part. But standing there in my friend Derek's spare bedroom, sleeping on a mattress on the floor, 31 years old with nothing to my name except a 15-year-old Honda Civic and $843 in my checking account, I believed she was right about the first part. I would never recover from this. They say rock bottom will teach you lessons that mountaintops never will. I'm here to tell you that's only partially true. Rock bottom doesn't teach you lessons. It breaks you down into pieces so small that you have to decide which pieces are worth putting back together. Derek Mitchell had been my friend since high school. He was a software engineer, single, living in a decent apartment in North Austin. When I had nowhere to go, he didn't hesitate. "Stay as long as you need, man," he said. I promised myself it would be 2 weeks, maybe 3. It turned into 5 months. I applied for jobs, operations manager positions, logistics coordinator roles, even entry-level stuff. Every application asked about employment gaps, criminal history, references. How do you explain that your employment gap exists because your ex-wife destroyed your company and your reputation? How do you list references when everyone you knew has been poisoned against you? I got 3 interviews in 2 months. None of them went anywhere. The last interviewer, a woman maybe 10 years younger than me, looked at my resume and said, "I see you owned Holloway Freight Solutions. Why did it shut down?" "Divorce settlement," I said honestly. She nodded slowly. "And you're applying for a $45,000 operations coordinator position?" "I need to work. I'm good at what I do." She smiled, but it wasn't kind. "Mr. Holloway, I think you're overqualified. We need someone who's going to stay in this role long term, not someone looking for a stepping stone back to ownership." "I'm not. Thank you for coming in. We'll be in touch." They weren't in touch. After that, I stopped applying for jobs in my field. The network was too small, too interconnected. Miranda's father had made sure everyone knew I was difficult and unstable. So I did what millions of people do when they need cash fast and have no other options. I became a gig economy worker. I signed up for Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, Instacart. I drove, I delivered, I shopped. 16-hour days, 7 days a week. The Honda Civic became my office, my identity, my entire world. Do you know what it's like to serve people who used to be your peers? To pick up passengers from restaurants you used to dine at regularly? To deliver food to neighborhoods you used to own property in? One night, about 3 months into driving, I picked up a couple from a steakhouse downtown. They were dressed up, laughing, clearly on a date or celebrating something. The guy was talking about a real estate deal he'd just closed. $23 million for that ranch property outside Dripping Springs, he said. My ranch. He was talking about my ranch. Miranda had flipped it for a profit. The guy never looked at me once during the 15-minute drive. I was invisible, just the driver. When they got out, They left a $3 tip on a $30 ride. I sat in that parking lot for 20 minutes, crying so hard I couldn't see. But crying doesn't pay bills. So I dried my eyes, turned on the app, and took the next ride. That became my routine. Wake up at 5 a.m., drive until 9 p.m., come home to Derek's apartment, eat whatever cheap food I'd grabbed between rides, shower, collapse on the mattress, and do it all again. Derek never complained. He'd try to talk to me sometimes, ask how I was doing, but I didn't have much to say. What was there to say? I was surviving, not living. The worst part wasn't the financial struggle. Money can be earned back. The worst part was the invisibility. When you're successful, people see you. They remember your name, they ask about your business, they respect your opinion. When you're driving their Uber, your furniture, you're part of the app experience, not a human being. I'd pick up people I'd done business with. People who'd shaken my hand at charity events, who'd called me Ethan and buddy and partner. Not one of them recognized me, or maybe they did, and they just pretended not to. I'll never know which option is worse. Miranda, meanwhile, was thriving. I know because I stupidly still followed her on social media for the first few months. She'd moved to Dallas, bought a condo in Uptown, started dating a venture capitalist named Preston Ward. They posted photos from Tulum, from Napa Valley, from a yacht in the Mediterranean. In one photo, Scout was in the background, lying on a designer dog bed. I finally blocked her after that. It was too painful. Months blurred together. Summer turned to fall. A fall turned to winter. I turned 32 in December. Derek tried to take me out for my birthday. I declined. What was there to celebrate? By the time spring rolled around, I'd saved up about $8,000. It wasn't much, but it was something. Proof that I could still function, still earn, still exist. That's what my life had become. Proof of existence. And then came that Tuesday night in late March. I'd been driving since 6 a.m. It was 11:30 p.m., and I was exhausted. I'd decided this would be my last ride of the night. The ping came from downtown, a pickup at a corporate office building. The passenger was a woman in her late 40s, dressed in business attire, carrying a leather briefcase. She looked tired, professional, kind. "Rough day?" I asked as she got in. "Long day," she said with a small smile. "But good. How about you?" "Same. Long but good." We made small talk for the first few minutes. She was an executive at some company, working late on a merger. I told her I used to run a trucking business. She seemed genuinely interested, asked good questions. It was the first real conversation I'd had with a passenger in months. When we got to her apartment complex in Westlake Hills, she thanked me sincerely. "I hope things turn around for you," she said. "You seem like someone who's been through a lot." "Thank you," I said. "That means more than you know." She left a $20 tip on the app. I was about to drive away when I noticed something in the back seat. Her purse. A nice leather purse, the kind that probably cost more than I made in a week. I called out, but she was already inside the building. I sat there holding this woman's purse, and I had a choice. Inside was probably cash, credit cards, ID, keys. I could have driven off. Who would have known? But something my mother used to say echoed in my head. Character is what you do when nobody's watching. I found a business card in the purse's side pocket. Catherine Brennan, Chief Operating Officer, Brennan Associates. The address listed was a downtown high-rise. It was midnight. I was exhausted. I'd been working for 18 hours. But I drove downtown anyway. The building was one of those glass and steel towers that scream money and power. The kind of place I used to walk into without a second thought. Now I felt like an intruder. The night security guard looked at me suspiciously. "Can I help you?" "I'm returning something for Catherine Brennan. She left her purse in my Uber." He called up to her office. "Someone's here returning a purse?" "Yeah." "Okay." He buzzed me through to the elevator. 15th floor. I rode up in silence, watching my reflection in the mirrored elevator walls. I looked tired. Older than 32. Beaten down. The elevator doors opened, and that's when everything changed. The 15th floor was elegant and quiet, with modern art on the walls and soft lighting that suggested success without being ostentatious. An executive assistant was standing near the reception desk, apparently waiting for me. She was maybe 60, with silver hair and a kind face. The moment she saw me, her expression changed. She stared at me like she'd seen a ghost. "Oh my God," she whispered. I stopped walking. "Is everything okay?" She took a step closer, her eyes scanning my face like she was solving a puzzle. "Sir, I'm sorry, this is going to sound strange, but are you James Holloway's son?" The name meant nothing to me. "I don't know anyone by that name," I said. Her hand went to her mouth. She looked like she might cry. "You don't know? How could you not know?" "Know what?" I'm just here to return a purse." She shook her head, trying to compose herself. "I'm sorry. I'm Barbara Hayes. I've been the executive assistant here for 37 years. James Holloway worked here in 1987. He talked about his son. About you." My stomach dropped. "My father died when I was 3 years old." Barbara's eyes filled with tears. "Yes, he did. 3 months ago." The world tilted. 3 months ago?" I repeated. "That's not possible. My mother told me he died when I was a kid." Barbara gestured toward a conference room. "Please, sit down. There's a lot you don't know." I followed her, my legs moving on autopilot. The conference room had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Austin skyline. It was beautiful and surreal and completely overwhelming. Barbara sat across from me, folding her hands on the table. "Your father's name was James Richard Holloway. He came to work for this firm in 1982 as a financial analyst. By 1987, he was a partner. He was brilliant, driven, one of the best investment strategists I've ever seen." I said nothing. I couldn't speak. In 1989, he left the firm suddenly. We didn't know why at the time. He just disappeared. But he'd left instructions with the senior partners. If anything ever happened to him, his shares in the company were to be held in trust for his heir. "His heir," I repeated numbly. "You." The room was spinning. "I don't understand. Why would he leave? Why didn't he ever contact me?" Barbara's expression turned sad. "I don't know all the details, but from what I understand, your mother and father had a very difficult separation. There was a restraining order, accusations, legal battles. Your mother didn't want him in your life. My mother said he abandoned us." "That's one version," Barbara said gently. "But based on what I saw, he never stopped looking for you. He hired investigators, filed motions, wrote letters. But your mother moved several times, changed her last name, kept you hidden." My mother. The woman who raised me alone, who worked 2 jobs to keep a roof over our heads, who died of cancer when I was 24, the woman who never once told me my father had been looking for me. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, my voice hoarse. Barbara stood up and walked to a filing cabinet in the corner of the room. She pulled out a thick folder and placed it in front of me. "Because 3 months ago, James Holloway died of a heart attack. He was 69 years old, and in his will, he left very specific instructions." I opened the folder with shaking hands. Inside were documents. Legal documents, mostly. Articles of incorporation, stock certificates, trust agreements, and photographs. Old photographs of a man who looked disturbingly like me. The same jaw, the same eyes, the same faint scar above the left eyebrow that I got falling off a bike when I was 7. No, that I'd always had. "He owned 75% of this company," Barbara said quietly. "Brennan Associates is worth approximately $180 million. Your father's stake was worth $135 million. The numbers didn't make sense. Nothing made sense." "Was," I whispered. "Is," Barbara corrected. "As of his death, his shares automatically transferred to his only biological heir. DNA confirmation was completed last month through the estate attorneys." I looked up at her. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you own 75% of this company, Mr. Holloway. You're the majority shareholder. You have been for 3 months. We've been looking for you." The folder slipped from my hands and hit the table. At that exact moment, Catherine Brennan walked into the conference room. She was the woman I'd given a ride to, the woman whose purse I'd just returned. She smiled at me with recognition and something else. Respect. "Mr. Holloway," she said, "I'm so glad Barbara found you. We have a lot to discuss." I spent the next 4 hours in that conference room, and by the time I walked out, my entire understanding of reality had been dismantled and rebuilt. Catherine Brennan sat across from me with Barbara beside her and a lawyer named Marcus Chen on speakerphone from Houston. They explained everything. Brennan Associates was an investment management firm specializing in mid-market private equity. My father, James Holloway, had been one of the founding partners in 1982, along with Catherine's father, Robert Brennan. When James left in 1989, he retained his ownership stake but gave Robert operational control. The agreement was simple. James would remain a silent partner, and his shares would transfer to his heir upon his death. "Your father believed you'd find him one day," Catherine said, "or that you'd find this company. He left instructions that we were to wait for you." "But I didn't find you," I said. "I just happened to drive your Uber." Catherine smiled. "Sometimes fate is just probability catching up to intention." The lawyer, Marcus, walked me through the legal documents. The DNA test had been completed using samples from James's estate and my information from a background check done when I got my Uber driver account. Apparently, the estate lawyers had been tracking me for months. "We've been trying to reach you," Marcus said, "but every address we had was outdated. Because I'd lost my house. Because I'd been living on Derek's couch. The documentation was ironclad. I was James Holloway's biological son. The stock certificates were legitimate. The trust was valid. As of that moment, I owned 75% of a company worth $180 million. My share was worth approximately $135 million. I sat there trying to process numbers that had no relationship to my reality. "What happens now?" I asked. Catherine leaned forward. "That depends on what you want. You can remain a silent partner like your father did. You can take a board seat. You can liquidate your shares, though I'd advise against that for tax reasons. Or you can step into an active role in the company. We've been looking for someone with operational expertise in logistics. Your background with a trucking company makes you uniquely qualified." I almost laughed. "My trucking company failed." "No," Catherine said firmly. "Your trucking company was stolen from you in a divorce. There's a difference." Something in her tone told me she'd done her homework. "You know about Miranda." "We know everything about you, Ethan. We've known for months. Your business acumen is sound. You built something impressive from nothing. The fact that it was taken from you doesn't diminish what you accomplished." Barbara placed another folder in front of me. "Your father left you something else," she said quietly. Inside was a sealed envelope with my name written in unfamiliar handwriting. I opened it with trembling fingers. The letter was short, 1 page, but every word hit like a hammer. "Son, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I hope I got to meet you before this moment, but if I didn't, please know I tried. I tried for 36 years to find you. Your mother was a good woman who made impossible choices. I don't blame her for protecting you from me. Our relationship was toxic, and she was right to leave, but I never stopped being your father. I never stopped hoping you'd walk through my door one day. I built this company for you. Every decision, every investment, every late night, it was all for you. By the time you read this, you'll have lost something. Maybe everything. That's how life works. It breaks us down before it builds us back up. Whatever was taken from you was nothing compared to what you're about to build. You're a Holloway. That means you don't quit, you don't break, you adapt, you learn, and you come back stronger. I'm sorry I wasn't there to teach you that myself. I'm proud of you, son. I always was. Love, Dad." I read it 3 times. Then I folded it carefully, put it back in the envelope, and looked up at the 3 people watching me. "I need some time," I said. "Of course," Catherine said. "Take all the time you need. But Ethan, we have board meeting in 2 weeks. I'd like you there." I nodded and stood on legs that didn't quite feel like my own. Barbara walked me to the elevator. "He watched you, you know," she said. "From a distance. He knew about your mother's death. He knew about the ranch, the business. He would have stepped in if you'd ever truly needed him, but he wanted you to build your own life first." "How do you know that?" I asked. She smiled sadly. "Because he told me. Every year on your birthday, he'd come into my office and show me the latest report from his investigator. Photos of you, updates about your life. He'd say, 'That's my boy. Look at what he's built.' I couldn't speak. He was proud of you, Ethan. More than you'll ever know." The elevator doors opened, and I stepped inside. When I walked out of that building at 4:30 in the morning, the city was still dark, still quiet. I sat in my Honda Civic for a long time, holding my father's letter, and I cried. Not sad tears, not happy tears. Just tears. The kind that come when your whole world breaks and rebuilds itself in the same moment. I didn't tell Derek right away. When I got back to the apartment at 5 a.m., he was still asleep. I lay on my mattress, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself that the last few hours had actually happened. By 7 a.m., I gave up on sleep and made coffee. Derek found me on the couch, staring at my father's letter. "You okay, man?" he asked. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I have," I said. "In a way." I told him everything. To his credit, Derek didn't call me crazy. He didn't say it was too good to be true. He just listened, and when I finished, he said, "So what are you going to do?" That was the question, wasn't it? I had 2 weeks before the board meeting. 2 weeks to decide what kind of man I wanted to be. The easy choice was to cash out. Liquidate my shares, take the money, disappear to some beach somewhere, and never look back. But that's not what my father did. He built something. He created value, employed people, made a difference. And despite everything Miranda had done to me, I realized I missed that. I missed building. I missed the challenge of solving problems, of creating something meaningful. On day 3, I called Catherine Brennan. I want to be involved, I said, not just as a shareholder. I want to work. She didn't hesitate. How do you feel about starting as Chief Operating Officer? It's a legitimate role, not a pity position. We need someone who understands operations, logistics, scaling businesses. When do I start? Monday. But first, we need to get you set up properly. New bank accounts, legal representation, all of that. Can you come by tomorrow? The next 4 days were a whirlwind. Marcus Chen, the estate attorney, helped me set up a proper corporate structure. We created an LLC to hold my shares, established trusts, set up accounts with asset protection. Rule number 1, Marcus said, is never let anyone take what's yours again. I met with the other board members. Catherine's brother David, who ran business development, an outside director named Patricia Wu, who specialized in finance, a former tech CEO named Robert Chambers. They all welcomed me cautiously but professionally. They wanted to see if I could actually contribute or if I was just a lucky heir. Fair enough. I wanted to prove it to myself, too. On Monday, I walked into Brennan Associates as an employee. Barbara had set up an office for me. Nothing ostentatious, but comfortable. A desk, a computer, a view. My father's office had been preserved exactly as he'd left it. Catherine offered to let me use it, but I declined. I need to earn this, I said. He built his legacy. I need to build mine. The work was challenging and invigorating. I dove into the company's portfolio, analyzing investments, identifying operational inefficiencies, proposing new strategies. It turned out my experience running a trucking company was more valuable than I'd realized. I understood logistics, supply chains, vendor relationships, scaling operations. Within a month, I'd restructured 3 underperforming portfolio companies and increased their efficiency by an average of 23%, the board noticed. Your father would be proud, David Brennan told me after a presentation. This is exactly the kind of thinking he would have done. Slowly, I started to believe I deserved to be there, but there was still unfinished business. Miranda. I'd avoided thinking about her during those first frantic weeks, but eventually I couldn't ignore it anymore. She'd taken everything from me through a combination of manipulation, legal maneuvering, and exploitation of my moment of weakness. I wasn't interested in revenge, not really, but I was interested in justice. I met with Marcus again, this time with a different agenda. I want to reopen the divorce case, I said. I want to review the settlement for fraud. Marcus studied me carefully. That's a difficult case to make. What's your evidence? I pulled out a folder. During the divorce, Miranda claimed she had no assets of her own, that she was entirely dependent on my income, but according to bank records I recently obtained, she'd been funneling money into offshore accounts for 2 years before filing. Marcus raised an eyebrow. How did you get these records? Let's just say I still have friends in the banking industry who were never convinced by her Victim Act. It wasn't quite legal, but it wasn't quite illegal either. Marcus smiled. Financial fraud in a divorce proceeding is serious. If you can prove she hid assets and lied under oath, the entire settlement could be voided. That's what I'm hoping. We filed the motion 3 weeks later. Miranda's attorney, Bradley Kensington, called my new lawyer within hours. What the hell is your client doing? He demanded. My lawyer, a woman named Sarah Chen, who specialized in high-net-worth divorce litigation, didn't flinch. My client is seeking to remedy a fraudulent settlement. If your client cooperates, this can be resolved quietly. If not, it becomes very public. The implication was clear. Preston Ward, Miranda's venture capitalist boyfriend, probably wouldn't appreciate his girlfriend being exposed as a liar and a fraud. Miranda tried to call me directly. I didn't answer. She tried to show up at my new office. Security turned her away. She sent texts. We need to talk. Please, I'm sorry. I made mistakes. I blocked her number. Finally, 2 months after filing the motion, Bradley Kensington reached out with a settlement offer. Miranda would return the ranch. She would sign over her remaining stake in the trucking company, which she'd run into the ground, by the way. She would pay $500,000 in restitution, and she would return Scout. Sarah looked at me. It's a good offer. You could push for more, but it would get messier. I don't want more, I said. I want what was mine. We accepted the settlement. 3 weeks later, I drove back to the ranch for the first time in over a year. The place looked different. Miranda had made changes, modernized some things, neglected others. The stables needed work, the fences needed painting, but it was mine again. I walked through the empty house, room by room, remembering what it had been and imagining what it could become. In the master bedroom, I found a cardboard box with my name on it. Inside was Scout's collar, his favorite toy, and a note in Miranda's handwriting. He never stopped waiting for you. Something about that broke me a little. An hour later, Miranda's assistant brought Scout to the ranch. The moment that dog saw me, he went crazy, barking, jumping, spinning in circles like he used to do when I'd come home from work. I knelt down, and he practically knocked me over. "I know, buddy," I whispered into his fur. "I missed you, too." We sat on the porch together as the sun set over the property, and for the first time in nearly 2 years, I felt like I was home. 6 months after everything changed, I was having dinner at a steakhouse in downtown Austin with Catherine and David Brennan, celebrating the close of a major investment deal. We were laughing, toasting, enjoying the success, and then I saw her, Miranda. She was across the restaurant with Preston Ward, the venture capitalist. But something was different. She looked diminished somehow, tired, older. Our eyes met. She excused herself from her table and walked over. Catherine noticed first and gave me a questioning look. I nodded slightly. "It's okay." "Ethan," Miranda said quietly, "can we talk? Just for a minute?" I excused myself from my table and walked with her toward the bar. "What do you want, Miranda?" She looked down at her hands. "I wanted to say I'm sorry. Really sorry." "Okay. That's it? Just okay?" I shrugged. "What do you want me to say? You took everything from me. You told me I'd never recover. You were wrong. I recovered." "No," she said, her voice cracking. "You didn't recover. You exceeded everything you were before. I saw the Forbes article. $135 million in inherited equity. COO of a major investment firm. You're more successful now than you ever were when we were together. And you care about that because?" She laughed bitterly. "Because I'm an idiot. Because I threw away a good man for money and status, and it turns out you had more of both than I ever imagined." "I didn't have it when you left me." "I know." She wiped her eyes. "Preston and I broke up. Did you know that? 3 months ago. He said I was too materialistic. Too shallow. Ironic, right?" I said nothing. "I've been going to therapy," she continued. "Trying to figure out why I am the way I am. Why I destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me." "Miranda, I'm not asking you to take me back," she said quickly. "I know that's not possible. I just wanted you to know that I know what I did, and I'm sorry. Truly, deeply sorry." I looked at this woman who'd once meant everything to me, this woman who'd destroyed me and forced me to rebuild myself from nothing. And I felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, not even pity. Just nothing. "I appreciate you saying that," I said, "and I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. Can we be friends, eventually?" "No," I said, not unkindly. "I don't think so, but I forgive you, if that matters. Mostly because holding on to anger was exhausting, and I'd rather spend my energy on building something new." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "You deserve good things, Ethan. I hope you find them." "I already have," I said. I walked back to my table, where Catherine and David were waiting. "Everything okay?" Catherine asked. "Yeah," I said. "Everything's perfect." And it was. A year after that night at the steakhouse, I stood in my father's preserved office at Brennan Associates. Barbara had retired 6 months earlier, and we'd thrown her a huge party. She cried when I gave her a generous retirement package and told her my father would have wanted her taken care of. "He always said you were the conscience of this company," I told her. "And you're the heart," she replied. Now, standing in this office that my father had built, I pulled out the letter he'd left me, the one I carried in my jacket pocket every day. I'd read it hundreds of times, but certain lines always hit differently. "Whatever was taken from you was nothing compared to what you're about to build." He was right. Not because of the money, though that certainly helped, but because losing everything had forced me to figure out who I really was. When I had the ranch and the business and the wife and the dog, I thought that was my identity. I thought success was measured in assets and status. But when all of that was stripped away, I learned something crucial. I wasn't what I owned, I was what I built, who I helped, how I treated people when things got hard. I'd rebuilt the ranch, but I'd also rebuilt myself. I'd modernized the property, turned it into a working ranch that employed 12 people from the local community. I'd started a scholarship fund for kids from single-parent homes. I'd invested in small businesses across Texas. At Brennan Associates, I'd helped grow the portfolio by 34% in 18 months. We'd created jobs, saved companies, made a real difference, and I'd found a new family in Catherine, David, and the team. people who valued me for what I contributed, not what I owned. Miranda reached out occasionally. Birthday texts, Christmas cards. I was polite but distant. That chapter was closed. I'd started dating someone new. Her name was Rachel. She was a veterinarian I'd met when I brought Scout in for a checkup. She had no idea who I was or what I was worth when we first met. She just liked me because I made her laugh, and I was good to my dog. That felt right. On the anniversary of my father's death, I drove to the cemetery where he was buried. I'd visited a few times over the past year, usually alone, usually unsure of what to say. This time was different. I sat on the grass next to his headstone, and I talked to him like I'd known him my whole life. I told him about the company, about the deals we'd closed, about the people we'd helped. I told him about Miranda and the divorce and the hard year that followed. I told him about Scout and Rachel and the ranch, and I told him thank you. "You gave me more than money, Dad," I said aloud. "You gave me a second chance, not just at success, but at becoming the person I was always supposed to be." The wind picked up, rustling the trees. "I hope you are proud," I said, "because I'm finally proud of myself." I stood, brushed off my jeans, and walked back to my truck. Scout was waiting in the passenger seat, tail wagging. "Come on, buddy," I said. "Let's go home." As I drove back to the ranch, the sun setting over the Texas hill country, I thought about Miranda's text from that terrible night 2 years ago. "You'll never recover from this." She was right, in a way. I didn't recover. I rebuilt. There's a difference. Recovery means going back to what you were. Rebuilding means becoming something better. My ex-wife took everything from me, but she didn't know that my father had left me everything I needed to become more than I ever was. Sometimes the greatest gifts come from the people we never met. And sometimes losing everything is the only way to discover what you're truly capable of building.